Hello, my dear listeners. I hope your day went well. And if not, I wish that everything gets better as soon as possible. Love and a big hug, your Natalie. If you like what I'm doing, please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Now make yourself comfortable. I'm going to start my story. Chapter 1. The City and Its Shadows. New York City never slept. Even at 3 in the morning, the streets buzzed with life, taxi horns blaring, neon signs flickering, and distant sirens wailing like wolves circling prey. Ethan Cross stood on the sidewalk outside his building, staring blankly at the space where he always parked his car. It was empty now, a rare victory in the daily battle for curb real estate. He sighed, running a hand through his thinning hair, and turned toward the grimy brick facade of the apartment complex. Inside, the air smelled faintly of mildew and burnt toast. The elevator groaned as it carried him up to the 4th floor, its ancient cables creaking like bones under strain. His footsteps echoed down the narrow hallway as he approached apartment 4B, fishing his keys from his pocket. For a moment, he paused outside Victor Kane's door, apartment 4A, and frowned. Another one of those damn notes had been taped there, this time scrawled in angry block letters. This is MY Spot. Stop parking here or else. Ethan rolled his eyes. Or else what? He muttered under his breath. Victor had been leaving these passive-aggressive messages for months, but Ethan ignored them. What could Victor do, anyway? Call the cops? Write a strongly worded letter to the landlord? Hardly worth losing sleep over. He unlocked his door, stepped inside, and let out a long sigh. The apartment was small and cluttered, every surface crowded with books, papers, or half-empty coffee mugs. Claire wasn't home yet. She often stayed late at work these days, claiming she needed the extra hours to finish projects. Ethan didn't question her too much. Their conversations had grown sparse lately, filled more with silence than words. As he hung his jacket on the hook by the door, something caught his attention, a soft, scratching sound coming from the wall near the kitchen. He froze, listening intently. The noise stopped almost immediately, replaced by the hum of the refrigerator. Probably just the pipes settling, he told himself. Or maybe a mouse. Either way, nothing to worry about. But deep down, something about the sound unsettled him. It wasn't quite like any rodent noise he'd heard before. There was an intelligence to it, a deliberate rhythm that sent a shiver crawling up his spine. Chapter 2. Inciting Incident. A disturbance in routine. By the following week, Ethan couldn't ignore the problem anymore. The scratching had grown louder, more frequent, and accompanied by other strange occurrences. One night, as he sat at the dining table going over spreadsheets for work, he spotted movement out of the corner of his eye. Turning sharply, he saw a rat dart across the counter, its beady eyes glinting in the dim light. Before he could react, it disappeared into a crack behind the stove. "Jesus Christ," he whispered, standing abruptly. His chair scraped against the floor, the sudden noise startling even himself. Over the next few days, the infestation escalated. Droppings appeared everywhere in the cabinets, under the couch, even on his pillow when he woke up one morning. Ethan tried setting traps, scattering poison pellets, and sealing cracks with steel wool, but nothing worked. If anything, the rats seemed to multiply overnight, growing bolder with each passing day. One evening, while rummaging in the pantry for cereal, Ethan felt something brush against his ankle. He yelped and stumbled backward, knocking over a jar of peanut butter. On the floor, staring up at him, was a rat nearly the size of a small cat. Its fur was matted and greasy, its teeth yellowed and sharp. It didn't run away like normal rats would. It simply watched him, unblinking, as if sizing him up. Ethan grabbed a broom and swung wildly, but the creature dodged effortlessly, vanishing into the shadows beneath the fridge. His heart pounded as he leaned against the counter, breathing heavily. This wasn't right. Rats weren't supposed to act like this. They were pests, not predators. That night, Ethan dreamed of rats swarming his body, their tiny teeth sinking into his flesh. When he woke, drenched in sweat, he realized he hadn't imagined the pain. Tiny red marks dotted his arms and legs, evidence of bites he hadn't noticed in his sleep. Chapter 3: Escalation. The rats gain intelligence. The attacks became relentless. During the day, Ethan avoided certain parts of the apartment, knowing the rats lurked within the walls, waiting. At night, he barricaded himself in the bedroom, wedging furniture against the door and keeping a baseball bat close at hand. But no matter how careful he was, they found ways to get to him. One afternoon, while attempting to clean up after another invasion, Ethan discovered something chilling. In the middle of the living room floor lay a note written in jagged, uneven handwriting. "Leave now." At first, he thought it might be another of Victor's threats, slipped under the door somehow. But upon closer inspection, he realized the message wasn't written in ink. It was composed of tiny droplets of blood. Ethan's mind raced. Could Victor really be behind this? Was it possible he'd trained the rats to torment him? The idea seemed absurd, yet the evidence pointed inexorably in that direction. The timing lined up perfectly. The escalation of the infestation coincided with Victor's increasingly aggressive warnings about the parking spot. Determined to confront his neighbor, Ethan stormed out of his apartment and pounded on Victor's door. When there was no answer, he tried the handle. To his surprise, it turned easily and the door creaked open. The smell hit him first, a nauseating mix of rot and ammonia. Inside, the apartment was dark, save for a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. Furniture was overturned, and piles of trash littered the floor. And then he saw them, the cages. Dozens of them stacked against the far wall, each containing writhing masses of rats. Before Ethan could process what he was seeing, a voice spoke from the shadows. "You shouldn't have come here." Victor emerged, his gaunt face twisted into a cruel smile. Chapter 3: Escalation. the rats gain intelligence. Victor Kane stepped into the dim light, his silhouette distorted by the flickering bulb above. He was thinner than Ethan remembered, his skin sallow and stretched taut over sharp cheekbones. His eyes gleamed with a manic intensity that sent a fresh wave of unease coursing through Ethan's veins. "You shouldn't have come here," Victor repeated, his voice low and measured, almost conversational. But there was an undercurrent to it, a simmering rage barely contained beneath the surface. Ethan instinctively took a step back toward the door, but Victor moved quickly, blocking his path. "What the hell is going on?" Ethan demanded, trying to keep his tone steady despite the panic rising in his chest. "These rats, they're everywhere. Are you doing this? Is this some kind of sick joke?" Victor tilted his head, studying Ethan like a predator sizing up its prey. Then he chuckled, a dry, humorless sound that made Ethan's skin crawl. "A joke? No, Ethan, this isn't a joke. This is justice." "Justice?" Ethan spat, incredulous. "For what? Because I park in your spot? You've lost your damn mind." Victor's smile vanished, replaced by a cold, reptilian glare. "You think this is about parking? Oh, Ethan, you really are as blind as everyone says." He gestured toward the cages behind him, where the rats stirred restlessly, their tiny claws scraping against metal bars. "This isn't just about you taking something that doesn't belong to you. It's about respect, about boundaries, about how little you care for anyone but yourself." Ethan opened his mouth to argue, but before he could speak, one of the cages rattled violently. A large rat leapt onto the floor, landing silently like a shadow come to life. It stared at Ethan, unblinking, its black eyes reflecting the faint light. More followed, spilling out of their confines until the room was teeming with them. "This ends tonight," Victor said, stepping aside to let the horde advance. "Leave my building or don't. Either way, they'll make sure you regret ever crossing me." Ethan didn't wait to hear more. He bolted for the door, slamming it shut behind him and sprinting down the hallway. Behind him, he heard the pitter-patter of tiny feet echoing in pursuit. When he reached his apartment, he slammed the door and shoved a heavy bookshelf against it, his breath coming in ragged gasps. For hours, he sat in silence, clutching the baseball bat and listening to the muffled sounds of scratching and scurrying beyond the walls. Sleep eluded him entirely that night. Chapter 4: The First Attack, Blood and Fear. The next morning, Ethan emerged from his makeshift fortress, exhausted and shaken. His nerves were frayed, his hands trembling as he poured himself a cup of coffee. He needed help, someone who could deal with this nightmare before it consumed him completely. But who would believe him? Who would take him seriously when even he struggled to wrap his head around what was happening? He decided to call an exterminator. Surely a professional could handle whatever twisted game Victor was playing. While waiting for the appointment later that day, Ethan tried to distract himself by cleaning up the mess left by last night's invasion. As he bent down to pick up a broken picture frame, something caught his eye, a trail of blood leading from the kitchen to the living room. His stomach churned. Following the trail, he found the source. One of the traps he'd set earlier had snapped shut on a particularly large rat. The creature wasn't dead, it writhed weakly, its body crushed but still twitching. Its teeth gnashed at the air, desperate and vicious. Ethan hesitated, unsure whether to put it out of its misery or leave it as a warning to the others. Before he could decide, the rat let out a high-pitched squeal, one so piercing it made his ears ring. Suddenly, the room erupted in chaos. Dozens of rats poured out of every crack and crevice, swarming toward him with terrifying speed. Ethan swung the baseball bat wildly, smashing several of them, but there were too many. They overwhelmed him, climbing onto his legs and arms, biting savagely. Pain exploded across his body as their teeth sank into his flesh. He screamed, stumbling backward until he tripped over the coffee table and fell hard onto the floor. Just as he thought it was over, the front door burst open. Claire stood there, wide-eyed and pale, holding a broom like a weapon. She shouted something unintelligible and began beating at the rats, driving them back toward the walls. Slowly, the swarm retreated, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as they'd appeared. Ethan lay there, bleeding and panting, staring up at her in disbelief. For a moment, she looked genuinely concerned. But then her expression shifted, hardening into something colder. "What the hell is wrong with you?" she snapped, dropping the broom. "How did you let this happen? What are we supposed to do now?" Her words stung more than the bites. Ethan wanted to explain, to tell her everything about Victor and the rats and the madness consuming his life. But looking at her face, he realized she wouldn't understand. She never did. Chapter 5. Unraveling the Mystery. Suspicion falls on Victor. Over the next few days, Ethan became obsessed with proving Victor's guilt. He started documenting everything: the noises, the attacks, the strange behavior of the rats. He installed cameras inside his apartment, hopping to catch evidence of Victor sneaking in and releasing the creatures. At night, he prowled the halls, listening for any sign of activity from 4A. One evening, while rummaging through Victor's trash, a move born of desperation rather than dignity, Ethan found something that made his blood run cold. A receipt from a pet store dated weeks ago, listing items like rat food, cages, and training manuals. Beneath it was a crumpled piece of paper covered in scribbled notes, detailing experiments with conditioning and reinforcement techniques. It was all the proof he needed. Victor wasn't just breeding rats. He was training them to attack, to invade, to terrorize. And it was all aimed squarely at Ethan. But why? Why go to such lengths over a parking spot? Something about the situation didn't add up. Victor's obsession seemed personal, far beyond mere territorial disputes. There had to be another layer to this madness. Ethan's suspicions deepened when he noticed subtle changes in Claire's behavior. She was distant, distracted, and increasingly evasive whenever he asked about her late nights at work. One night, unable to sleep, he checked her phone while she showered. What he found shattered whatever remained of his trust. Text messages between Claire and Victor. Flirty exchanges that escalated into declarations of love. Plans to meet secretly. And finally, the chilling confirmation of their shared intent. Claire, he's cracking. Soon, he won't fight back. Victor, good. Let the rats finish him off. Ethan felt like the floor had been ripped out from under him. His wife, the woman he'd shared his life with, was conspiring with his tormentor. This wasn't just revenge, it was murder. Chapter 6, Betrayal, the Wife's Secret. Ethan sat on the edge of their bed, staring at Claire's phone in his trembling hands. Each word from those texts felt like a blade twisting deeper into his chest. He wanted to scream, to confront her, to demand answers, but he couldn't move. His body was frozen, overwhelmed by a cocktail of emotions: betrayal, rage, disbelief. Claire emerged from the bathroom, towel drying her hair. She glanced at him briefly before tossing the towel onto a chair and heading toward her dresser. For a moment, she seemed oblivious to the storm brewing inside him. Then she noticed the phone in his hand. Her expression shifted instantly from casual indifference to panic. "What are you doing with my phone?" Her voice was sharp, accusatory, as if he were the one who had overstepped. Instead of answering, Ethan held up the device, showing her the screen. The messages were still open, stark and damning. Claire froze, her face paling. She didn't deny it or try to explain. Instead, she straightened, her features hardening into something cold and calculating. "You weren't supposed to see that," she said finally, her tone flat. It wasn't an apology, it was a statement of fact. "Were you ever going to tell me?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse. "Or were you just going to let Victor's rats kill me while you stood by and watched?" Claire sighed, crossing her arms. "Don't be dramatic, Ethan. This isn't about the rats. It's about you. You've been blind to everything around you for years: your job, your habits, your selfishness. I tried to make things work, but you wouldn't change. So yes, I found someone else. Someone who actually cares about me. And that excuses this." Ethan gestured wildly at the room, at the chaos they'd lived through. "You're plotting my death, Claire, with our neighbor. Does none of this bother you? Do you even hear yourself right now?" She shrugged, her lips curling into a bitter smile. "It's not personal, Ethan. It's survival. You've made life miserable for both of us, for me and for Victor. Parking in his spot was just the last straw. He hates you too, you know. And when he came to me with his plan, well, it seemed like fate." The words hit Ethan like a punch to the gut. He wanted to argue, to plead, to remind her of the life they'd built together. But deep down, he knew she was right about one thing. He hadn't been present. Not truly. Work had consumed him, stress had dulled his empathy, and somewhere along the way, he'd stopped fighting for their marriage. Still, that didn't justify what she and Victor had done. "I don't deserve this," he whispered, more to himself than to her. "No," Claire agreed, her voice icy. "But you also didn't deserve me, or happiness. Not anymore." Chapter 7, Climax, the final confrontation. The next evening, Ethan waited in the shadows of the basement stairwell, clutching a crowbar in sweaty hands. He'd spent hours preparing for this moment, gathering tools and fortifying his resolve. Tonight, he would end this nightmare once and for all, or die trying. He heard them before he saw them. The faint patter of tiny feet echoing through the dimly lit space below. The basement smelled of damp concrete and rotting wood, its corners shrouded in darkness. Somewhere in the distance, water dripped steadily from a leaking pipe. Ethan's heart pounded as he descended the stairs, each step creaking under his weight. Victor was there, standing amidst a sea of cages stacked haphazardly against the walls. Hundreds of rats milled about, their eyes glinting like shards of glass in the flickering fluorescent light. Victor turned as Ethan approached, a smug grin spreading across his gaunt face. "Ah, Ethan," he said, spreading his arms wide. "I wondered how long it would take you to figure it out. Did Claire tell you everything? Or did you piece it together yourself?" "Shut up," Ethan growled, raising the crowbar. "This ends now." Victor chuckled, unconcerned. "Go ahead, try to stop me. But remember, those rats aren't mine anymore. They belong to themselves now, and they won't forgive you." Before Ethan could respond, Victor whistled sharply. The sound pierced the air, and the rats surged forward as one, a writhing mass of fur and teeth. Ethan swung the crowbar wildly, smashing several of them, but they kept coming, relentless and unyielding. Desperation took hold. Spotting a pile of oily rags near the furnace, Ethan grabbed a lighter from his pocket and ignited them. Flames erupted, casting flickering orange light across the basement. The rats recoiled momentarily, their instincts overriding Victor's training. Seizing the opportunity, Ethan hurled the flaming rags into the nearest cage, igniting the wooden shelves stacked with food and bedding. Fire spread rapidly, consuming the cages and sending plumes of thick smoke billowing through the room. Victor screamed, lunging toward the flames in a futile attempt to save his precious creatures. Ethan tackled him to the ground, pinning him down as the inferno raged around them. "You lose," Ethan snarled, pressing the crowbar against Victor's throat. "This is your fault, your obsession, your hatred." Victor coughed, choking on the smoke. "You think you've won," he rasped. "You'll never escape what you've done." With a final surge of strength, Ethan slammed the crowbar into Victor's temple, silencing him forever. Gasping for breath, he staggered to his feet and stumbled toward the exit, the heat searing his skin. Behind him, the fire roared louder, devouring everything in its path. Chapter 8, Twist Ending. The True Mastermind. Ethan collapsed on the sidewalk outside the building, coughing violently as sirens wailed in the distance. Flames licked at the windows of the basement, drawing curious neighbors from their apartments. Among them was Claire, wrapped in a bathrobe, her expression unreadable. When the paramedics arrived, they treated Ethan's burns and ushered him into an ambulance. As they drove away, Claire lingered behind, watching the blaze with a satisfied smirk. She pulled out her phone and typed a quick message. "Claire, phase 1 complete. Let's finish this." On the other end, a reply came almost immediately. "Unknown number. Agreed, soon. We'll have nothing left to fear." Epilogue: the cycle continues. Months later, Claire moved into Victor's rebuilt apartment. Though Victor survived the fire, he was a shell of his former self, his mind fractured, his body broken. Claire cared for him dutifully, ensuring he followed her every command. To the outside world, she played the role of the grieving widow, mourning her husband's tragic descent into madness. But late at night, when the city fell silent, strange noises echoed through the building. Scratching, scurrying, whispers carried on the wind. Neighbors began complaining of infestations again, though no one could pinpoint the source. One evening, as Claire stood on the balcony overlooking the street, she spotted a familiar figure limping down the sidewalk. It was Ethan, or what remained of him. His clothes were tattered, his face gaunt and hollow. In his wake trailed a swarm of rats, their eyes glowing like embers in the dark. Claire smiled, closing the sliding glass door. She had underestimated him, it seemed. But it didn't matter. The rats were hers now, and they would ensure that Ethan's suffering never ended.